In the dark of night, under a sky filled with stars and the watchful eyes of angels, a teenage girl from a small village in France heard voices that would change the course of history. This is not a fairy tale or a legend, but the real story of Jeanne d'Arc, known to the world as Joan of Arc. Her life was a whirlwind of divine inspiration, heroic deeds, and a tragic end that left a lasting mark on the world. In 1428, when Joan was just a simple peasant girl, her village of Domremy was a quiet place far from the centers of power. France was in the midst of the 100 Years' War, a long and brutal conflict with England. The English and their allies, the Burgundians, had taken control of much of northern France, including the capital, Paris. The French king, Charles VII, known as the Dauphin at the time, had not been crowned and was seen as weak and ineffective. One day, Joan began to hear voices. These voices, she claimed, were from God and his saints, St. Catherine, St. Michael, and St. Margaret. They told her that she had a divine mission, to expel the English from France and have the Dauphin crowned as the rightful king. This was no small task for a young, uneducated girl from a village, but Joan was convinced of her calling. Joan's journey began when she convinced the local garrison commander to take her to the Dauphin. At first, Charles VII was skeptical. He had heard of many visionaries and prophets, and most of them were just seeking attention. But Joan's unwavering faith and her detailed knowledge of the king's private prayers and doubts convinced him. Charles decided to give her a chance. With the support of a few loyal nobles, Joan was equipped with armor and a horse. She joined the French army and was sent to the besieged city of Orléans. The city was a crucial stronghold, and if it fell, the English would have a clear path to the heart of France. Joan's arrival was like a breath of fresh air for the besieged French soldiers. She led them in a series of daring attacks, and in May 1429, Orléans was freed. The victory was a turning point in the war. It boosted the morale of the French and showed that the English could be defeated. Buoyed by this success, Joan convinced Charles to travel to Reims, the traditional coronation site for French kings. The journey was dangerous, as they had to pass through enemy territory. But Joan's determination and the renewed spirit of the French army made it possible. In July 1429, Charles VII was crowned King of France, with Joan standing proudly by his side. It was a moment of triumph, but it was also the beginning of the end for Joan. In May 1430, while trying to lift the siege of Compiègne, Joan was captured by the Burgundians. They sold her to the English, who saw her as a dangerous threat. The English needed to disprove Joan's claims of divine guidance, as her success had undermined their claim to the French throne. Joan was put on trial for heresy, a crime that carried the death penalty. The trial was a farce, with the church, controlled by the English, doing everything possible to convict her. Despite her courage and intelligence, Joan was found guilty and burned at the stake in Rouen in May 1431. She was only 19 years old. Joan's death did not immediately stop the English, but it did mark a shift in the war. The French, inspired by her sacrifice, continued to fight with renewed vigor. The Burgundians, seeing the tide turning, began to question their alliance with the English. In 1435, the Duke of Burgundy signed the Treaty of Arras, officially switching sides and supporting Charles VII. This alliance, combined with the French army's growing strength, led to the recapture of Paris in 1436 and the gradual liberation of other French territories. By 1453, the 100 Years' War was effectively over. The English had lost all their territories in France, except for the port of Calais. The war had lasted for over a century and had a profound impact on both countries. It had forged national identities and changed the way wars were fought. The use of artillery, which had played a crucial role in Joan's campaigns, became a standard part of military strategy. The war also led to the decline of the feudal system and the rise of centralized monarchies. While Joan's life was short, her legacy lived on. She became a symbol of French nationalism and a martyr for the Catholic Church. In 1456, a retrial was held, and Joan was posthumously declared innocent. She was beatified in 1909 and canonized as a saint in 1920. Today, she is remembered as one of the greatest heroes in French history, a girl who heard voices and changed the world. But Joan's story is not just about her. It is also about the world she lived in, a world that was changing in profound ways. The Church, which had been the center of European life for centuries, was facing its own crisis. The Great Schism, a split in the Church that saw multiple popes claiming authority, had weakened the Church's moral and political power. The Council of Constance, held from 1414 to 1418, attempted to resolve the schism and address the need for reform. It was a time of intense theological debate and political maneuvering, with powerful figures like Emperor Sigismund and theologians like Jean Gerson and Pierre Dailly playing key roles. The Council of Constance also dealt with the issue of heresy, particularly the teachings of Jan Hus, a Czech reformer who had been influenced by the ideas of John Wycliffe. Hus was summoned to the council to defend his beliefs, but was ultimately condemned and burned at the stake in 1415. His death, like Joan's, became a rallying point for those who sought reform within the Church. The ideas and movements that emerged from the Council of Constance would eventually lead to the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. Meanwhile, in the realm of military and technological innovation, the 15th century saw significant changes. The Hussite Wars, fought by the followers of Jan Hus in Bohemia, introduced new military tactics. The Hussites developed a moving fort strategy, using a ring of wagons to create a mobile defensive position. This allowed them to repel cavalry charges and launch counterattacks. They were also among the first to use handheld firearms extensively, a development that would revolutionize warfare. In Portugal, Prince Henry the Navigator was launching expeditions that would eventually lead to the Age of Exploration. His efforts to map the coast of Africa and establish trade routes were driven by a mix of religious zeal and economic ambition. These voyages laid the groundwork for the Portuguese Empire and opened up new possibilities for global trade and cultural exchange. Despite these advances, the 15th century was also a time of great hardship. The population of Europe had been decimated by the Black Death, and recovery was slow. Cities like Rouen and Schleswig saw their populations and economies shrink. The 100 Years' War had left much of France devastated, and the countryside was plagued by bands of marauders known as écorcheurs. The cost of the war, in terms of human lives and economic resources, was staggering. Yet, even in the midst of this chaos, there were signs of change. Charles VII, who had been a weak and indecisive leader, grew into his role as king. He implemented important reforms, including the establishment of a standing army. This was a significant departure from the feudal system, where armies were raised by nobles and their vassals. The new professional army, led by skilled commanders and equipped with modern artillery, was a key factor in France's eventual victory over the English. The end of the 100 Years' War also marked the beginning of a new era in European history. The medieval world, with its interconnectedness and shared cultural and religious values, was giving way to a more nationalistic and politically fragmented Europe. The brotherhood of chivalry, which had bound knights across Europe, was breaking down. The internationalism of the universities, which had fostered a shared intellectual community, was also waning. In the end, Joan of Arc's life and death were part of a larger tapestry of change. She was a catalyst, a spark that ignited a flame of national pride and resistance. Her story is a reminder that even the most unlikely individuals can play a crucial role in shaping history. It is a story of faith, courage, and the power of a single voice to inspire a nation.